Today I am going to explain Amtrak. If you have taken a passenger train within the US, it has probably been an Amtrak train. And if it was not, it was probably on a commuter railroad, many of which are owned by Amtrak, or it may have been on an excursion train somewhere, which are not run by Amtrak. I hear an airplane. I hear an airplane that does not appear to be on a heading for Harrisburg International Airport. It is going this way, the airport is that way, and it looks like it is too high to bank around before it lands at the airport. Which kind of brings me to my point about how Amtrak came to be. Way back in the day, if you wanted to get somewhere, you walked. Then people started riding horses. Then people started riding horse carriages. Then some people realized that the horse carriages could move better if they put rails under them. There were railroads before steam locomotives came up, even dating back to the 1600s in parts of Europe. They were just horse-drawn railways. The steam engine was invented around 1804 or so. Actually, there were prototypes of it a bit before that, but the first one that could move up and down trains came out around then. And then people started riding trains to places, starting in England and then moving on to eventually the US, other parts of Europe, Japan. One story I heard was that in Japan, it's customary to take your shoes off when you go into somebody's house. When the first trains came to Japan, people got on the train, they took their shoes off before they got on, then they got off the train and nobody had shoes. Which I kind of think is a funny story. But the US was certainly no exception with the passenger train service, and if you wanted to get places, you took the train. But then the cars came to be, and a lot of the US was still undeveloped when cars came to be, so a lot of cities grew up built for the cars. Then airplanes also came to be, and people found it was a lot easier to just fly, like this plane up here. It was easier to fly somewhere, and it would take a lot less time and be a lot less stressful than taking a train there. So, railroads in the US started to decline. And it looked like they were going to be phased out altogether because freight railroads did not want to operate their passenger trains. They lost money and no one wanted to take them. But people still do rely on trains a lot, especially to get between densely populated areas. So in 1971, May 1st, 1971, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation came to be under the brand name Amtrak, signed into law by Richard Nixon. Amtrak is basically what saved passenger railroads within the US. Nowadays, Amtrak is just a shell of what passenger railroads used to be. For example, this here is the Norfolk Southern Port Road branch. There is no Amtrak service on it. It does interchange with an Amtrak line all the way down in Maryland, near the Chesapeake Bay. And that's why most trains here run at night, because Amtrak doesn't want the trains to go and get in the way of their trains on that line. Okay, so I've explained how Amtrak came to be. How it is now, the biggest thing I've heard about people assuming about Amtrak is that it goes to more places than it really does. If you're in a big city, you probably have Amtrak service there in some way, shape, or form, but the trains may not even come every day. There's some cities where Amtrak only comes every 3 days, or 3 times a week, I should say. There's places in West Virginia, namely the parts of West Virginia that I hung out at when I was working in the New River Gorge. The train only comes 3 times a week. During the pandemic, when it was really bad in a lot of places, like at the start of it, many routes were either canceled or dialed back to 3 times a week. For some reason, they canceled the services between Harrisburg and New York, the Keystone service, and the Pennsylvanian, which goes to Pittsburgh too. I don't know why they did that, because those routes carry more people and make more money than other routes do. But Amtrak does not currently service my hometown. A lot of people think it does, including people who live around here, but it doesn't. The closest one is Lancaster that you can drive over to. It's about 30 minutes away. I drive a little bit further and go to Elizabethtown for the train there because that train station is a bit nicer than Lancaster's. And over here, I just happen to be in an area where you can get on a train easier than other places. Like to go to Philadelphia, it's about an hour train ride. New York is a bit further, it's about 3.5 hours, but you can do it really easily. Other parts of the country, not quite. So, another thing I've heard is that people think Amtrak trips take less time than they really do. The longest Amtrak trip I've ever been on was from Prince, West Virginia to Washington, D.C., which was on the Cardinal, and that was when I was working down in the New River Gorge. And people think that it only takes like 2 hours to get from between those cities, but in reality, it takes about 8, 9, 10 hours sometimes. The one I was on got delayed a bit, and it took about 11 hours, which on that train, it's nothing of a delay. I've heard it being delayed up to 24 hours in some cases. And the other point is that people don't think about Amtrak getting delayed. If Amtrak is on a freight line, as it is outside of most places near big cities, the freight trains get priority over the Amtrak trains. They're not supposed to, but they do anyway, even though it's the federal law that they are supposed to give priority to Amtrak. Often they just don't. So trains have to wait for the freight trains, and they can get delayed, and sometimes delayed really bad, 24 hours or more, I've heard. Sometimes the train will get delayed so bad that they'll have to send a bus to get people and get them between other parts of the network. So there's a lot of problems with Amtrak today. Joe Biden is currently the president, and a lot of people call him Amtrak Joe because of his historically good support for Amtrak. But even he can't make it good as other people think he can. I thought that Joe Biden would come in, and by this point, Amtrak would be going to more places and running better, and he'd finally clamp down on the freight railroads. But in case you hadn't noticed, he is a politician, and politicians don't always do what they said they were going to do. In this case, it's just like anything else. So for now, the trains are just going to be slow and not going to many places, not like in Europe. And that is Amtrak Explained. Any other questions? Please feel free to ask me them. I love answering questions about trains. And hopefully a train will come here soon. It's all red signals, and I haven't seen anything from any of my train friends about one coming. But maybe I'll get lucky. Happy Super Bowl Sunday, everyone!